Have you ever considered the idea that you glow? Not in some metaphorical, inspirational quote kind of way, but literally, physically glow? The truth is, it's easy to dismiss this thought. After all, we're taught that light requires a source, a bulb, a star, a flame. We are not often perceived as light sources ourselves. But what if I told you that you and every living thing around you are constantly emitting a faint, almost imperceptible light? It sounds like something from a science fiction novel, doesn't it? A hidden power, perhaps? A secret energy field detectable only by the most advanced technology? The kind of stuff that spawns conspiracy theories and late-night paranormal discussions. But this isn't pseudoscience or a mystical claim. A real, scientifically verified phenomenon called biophatin emission. And it's far more fascinating than any sci-fi trope. Think of it like this. Our senses are limited. We perceive only a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. We see visible light, feel heat, and maybe hear high or low frequency sounds, but there's a whole universe of energy and information out there, operating on frequencies and wavelengths that are completely invisible to our conscious awareness. Biophatin emission exists in that invisible realm. For centuries, science viewed living organisms as primarily chemical machines. Energy and processes happen, byproducts out. Light was an external factor, a tool for seeing, not something intrinsically generated by life itself. But the more we learned about quantum physics and the intricate world of cellular biology, the more this view began to crumble. We started to see life not as a closed system, but as an open, interconnected web of energy, information, and yes, light. Before you envision yourself as a walking, talking glow stick, it's vital to understand the incredibly faint nature of biophatin emissions. We're talking about light that is thousands of times weaker than what our eyes can detect. Trying to spot a single candle flame from many miles away is a pretty good comparison. In fact, that's precisely the kind of challenge that researchers face when studying these elusive particles of light. So why isn't this common knowledge? Why isn't it taught in every science class? Well, the primary reason is the sheer difficulty in detecting and measuring these emissions. It demands highly specialized and incredibly sensitive equipment. The signal the biophatin emission is so weak that it can be easily drowned out by background noise or interfered with by environmental factors. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a roaring stadium. It demands precise controls, meticulous experimental design, and a healthy dose of patience despite the challenges. Scientists have diligently been uncovering the secrets of biophatins for decades. Piece by piece, they're assembling a compelling picture that is revolutionizing our understanding of life, health, and the very nature of consciousness. And that's the journey we'll be taking together, bit by bit. Think of your body as a massive, bustling city, a complex metropolis made up of trillions of individual cells. Each cell has its own specialized task, its own unique function, and yet they all work together in remarkable harmony. Now, imagine that these cells aren't only communicating through chemical signals, hormones, and electrical impulses. What if they're also communicating through incredibly faint bursts of light, tiny, ephemeral flashes of photons, carrying information, and coordinating activity across the cellular network? That, in essence, is the idea behind biophatin communication. It suggests that our bodies are constantly engaged in a silent, luminous conversation at the cellular level. And here's the crucial point. Biophotons aren't merely random byproducts of cellular metabolism. They appear to be highly organized and strikingly coherent. In other words, they exhibit a degree of order and coordination that suggests they play a very specific and purposeful role in biological processes. Think of it like this. Imagine the chaotic, scattered light of a disco ball versus the focused, intense beam of a laser. One is disorganized, random, essentially noise. The other is precise, directed, and capable of transmitting information or energy with incredible accuracy. Biophotons seem to function more like a laser than a disco ball. This coherence is what makes biophatin emissions so exciting. It implies that these faint bursts of light aren't just random noise. They're a sophisticated form of communication occurring within our bodies. They may be intimately involved in everything from DNA repair and immune system regulation to cellular growth, embryonic development, and even possibly consciousness itself. So where does this light come from? What is the source of these mysterious particles of light? The answer, quite elegantly, lies in the very nature of life itself. Biochemical reactions. Our cells are in constant flux, undergoing a mind-boggling number of chemical processes every second. They are constantly breaking down molecules, building new ones, and converting energy from one form to another. In these reactions, especially those involving highly reactive molecules, can often release energy in the form of light. Imagine it as tiny sparks igniting within each cell. Brief flashes of energy that are then emitted as biophotons. These sparks, multiplied trillions of times throughout our bodies, create a faint but constant stream of light that permeates our tissues, our organs, and perhaps even extends slightly beyond our physical boundaries. It's a subtle, yet profound testament to the dynamic energy that fuels life. The more we learn about biophotons, the more we realize that they are not merely passive byproducts of cellular activity, but active participants in the orchestration of life. They seem to be deeply connected to our DNA, the very blueprint of our existence, and may even play a crucial role in regulating gene expression and maintaining the integrity of our genetic code. It really is quite amazing to consider as we delve deeper into the world of biophotons. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged and your understanding of life expanded. Get ready to explore the hidden light within, a light that connects us, potentially, to the very fabric of the universe. It's time to see ourselves in a whole new light, literally. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of how emotions relate to this fascinating light, it's crucial to understand the scale we're talking about when it comes to biophoton emission. I mean, we've established that you're glowing, but let's be real. You're not exactly radiating like a supernova. Think of it more like a barely perceptible shimmer, a subtle dance of light at the cellular level. The thing is quantifying this shimmer. This biophoton emission requires a serious appreciation for just how incredibly faint it actually is. We're talking about a level of light that is almost beyond comprehension. Imagine trying to measure the light from a single firefly, not just from across a field, but from across the galaxy. That gives you some sense of the challenge we face too. Put it in perspective. The intensity of biophoton emission is typically measured in photons per square centimeter per second, and the numbers are, well, they're mind-bogglingly small. We're talking about values that can range from just a few photons to perhaps a few hundred photons emitted per square centimeter of tissue per second. Now let's unpack that a little. A single photon, as you may know, is the smallest unit of light, a fundamental particle of electromagnetic radiation. It's practically nothing. And we're detecting only a handful of these tiny particles emanating from each tiny area of our bodies. Every single second. Compare that to the light that our eyes can perceive. A typical light bulb, for example, emits trillions upon trillions of photons every second. So, biophoton emission is orders of magnitude weaker, a whisper compared to a shout. In fact, biophoton emission is so faint that it is thousands, even millions of times weaker than the light that our eyes are capable of detecting. That's why we can't just look at someone and see them glowing. Our visual systems simply aren't sensitive enough to pick up these subtle emissions. Think about it this way. You were standing in a completely dark room, and someone lit a single candle miles away. You probably wouldn't be able to see it. The light would be too diffused, too weak to register. Biophoton emission is even fainter than that distant candle flame. This extreme faintness poses a significant challenge for researchers. Detecting and measuring biophotons requires highly specialized equipment, including incredibly sensitive photomultiplier tubes and sophisticated shielding to block out any extraneous light. Any stray photon from the environment can easily overwhelm the signal, making it difficult to isolate and study the biophotons emitted by living organisms. The instruments used to measure biophoton emission are typically kept in completely dark rooms, shielded from all external light sources. Researchers have to take meticulous precautions to avoid contamination. Even the slightest amount of ambient light can throw off the measurements, and it's not just visible light that can interfere. Even infrared radiation, which we can't see, can generate background noise that obscures the biophaton signal. That's why these experiments are often conducted at controlled temperatures to minimize thermal radiation. So you can see why studying biophaton emission is such a technical feat. It's like trying to hear a pin drop in the middle of a rock concert. You need incredibly sensitive equipment and a carefully controlled environment to isolate the faint signal from the overwhelming noise. But despite these challenges, scientists have persevered, driven by the tantalizing possibility that biophotons hold a key to understanding the fundamental processes of life. And as technology has advanced, our ability to detect and measure these faint emissions has improved dramatically, allowing us to delve deeper into the mysteries of biophaton communication. Now, you might be asking yourself, if biophaton emission is so weak, how can it possibly have any biological significance? It's a fair question. It seems counterintuitive that something so subtle could play a role in complex processes like DNA repair, immune system regulation, or even emotional expression. The answer, in part, lies in the concept of coherence. As we mentioned earlier, biophotons are not just random byproducts of cellular metabolism. They appear to be highly organized and coherent, meaning they exhibit a degree of order and coordination that suggests they play a specific role in biological processes. Think of it like this. A single drop of water might not seem very powerful, but a tsunami, a massive wave formed by the coordinated movement of countless water molecules, can be devastating. Similarly, while a single biophoton is incredibly weak, the coordinated emission of many biophotons acting in unison could potentially have a significant biological effect. Furthermore, the cellular environment is incredibly crowded with molecules packed tightly together. This means that even a faint signal like a biophaton can interact with nearby molecules and trigger a cascade of reactions. It's like a tiny spark igniting a chain reaction. So while the intensity of biophaton emission may be incredibly low, the potential for biological impact is very real. And as we continue to refine our understanding of biophaton communication, we may discover that these faint emissions play a far more significant role in our health and well-being than we ever imagined. These biophotons aren't just random noise, a byproduct of cellular respiration or some kind of biological static. Think of them less like the scattered, chaotic light of a bonfire and more like the focused, precise beam of a laser. The key difference, coherence, in this context, means that the biophotons exhibit a degree of order and synchronization. It suggests that they're not just individual, independent bursts of light, but rather a coordinated symphony of photons, each playing its part in a larger, more complex process. Think of it as the difference between a random scattering of musicians, each playing their own tune, versus a perfectly synchronized orchestra, where every instrument is playing in harmony to create a beautiful, meaningful melody. That harmony, in the case of biophotons, hints at a sophisticated form of communication. This coherence is absolutely crucial. Without it, we'd just be looking at random emissions, biological noise that tells us nothing. The fact that biophotons are coherent implies they carry information. They are not just a consequence of life. They are actively participating in the orchestration of life itself. Imagine your body as a vast, incredibly complex internet, but instead of cables and wires, the information is being transmitted via these tiny, almost imperceptible bursts of light. Each cell is a node on this network, sending and receiving information in real time. This communication network is not limited to one specific organ or tissue. It's body-wide. It's all-encompassing. It's instantaneous. Now, what kind of information could these biophotons be carrying? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Research suggests they could be involved in a whole host of vital biological processes, from DNA repair and replication to immune system regulation and cellular growth. Think about DNA, the very blueprint of life. It's constantly under attack. From various stressors, radiation, toxins, even just the normal processes of metabolism. These attacks can cause damage to the DNA, leading to mutations and potentially serious health problems. But our bodies have incredible repair mechanisms in place, and biophotons might play a key role in orchestrating those repairs. Some studies suggest that damaged DNA emits altered biophoton signals, acting as a kind of distress call to alert the repair machinery. These signals could then guide the repair enzymes to the exact location of the damage, ensuring that it's fixed quickly and efficiently, and it doesn't stop there. Biophotons may also be involved in regulating gene expression, the process by which our genes are turned on or off. By influencing gene expression, biophotons could play a crucial role in determining which proteins are produced in our cells, and ultimately, how those cells function. This could have profound implications for everything from development and aging to disease prevention and treatment. The immune system, our body's defense force against invading pathogens, is another area where biophotons may play a significant role. Immune cells need to communicate with each other to coordinate their attacks, and biophotons could provide a rapid and efficient means of communication. Imagine these photons acting like little messengers, relaying information about the presence of invaders, the type of threat, and the appropriate response. Consider embryonic development, the process by which a single fertilized egg transforms into a complex organism with trillions of cells, each specialized for a specific function. This is an incredibly intricate and tightly regulated process, and biophotons may be involved in coordinating the development of different tissues and organs. Some research suggests that developing embryos emit specific patterns of biophotons, which could act as guidance cues for cell differentiation and migration. It's like having a tiny internal GPS system, guiding each cell to its correct location and function. The implications of all of this are truly mind-boggling. If biophotons are indeed a sophisticated form of communication within the body, then understanding their language, their codes, and their signals could unlock new possibilities for diagnosing and treating a wide range of diseases. Imagine being able to detect subtle changes in biophoton emissions that indicate the early stages of cancer, long before any other symptoms appear. Or imagine being able to use biophoton therapy to stimulate tissue regeneration and accelerate healing after an injury. The potential applications are virtually limitless. And while much of this is still in the realm of research, the possibilities are incredibly exciting. But even beyond the practical applications, the discovery of biophoton communication challenges our fundamental understanding of life itself. It suggests that living organisms are far more interconnected and sophisticated than we ever imagined. It hints at a deeper level of organization and communication, a subtle yet powerful force that orchestrates the symphony of life from within. We're not just biological machines. We are luminous, communicative ecosystems of light. Now, you might be wondering where this light comes from in the first place. What is the source of these mysterious biophotons? The answer, as is so often, the case in biology lies within the intricate dance of energy and matter at the cellular level. It's a story of biochemical reactions, molecular vibrations, and the fundamental properties of light itself. Think of your cells as miniature power plants, constantly engaged in a whirlwind of chemical activity. They're breaking down nutrients for energy, synthesizing proteins for structure and function, and replicating DNA for growth and repair. These processes involve countless biochemical reactions, each one a tiny spark of energy exchange. Many of these reactions involve molecules. In excited states, atoms are molecules that have absorbed energy and are temporarily holding on to it. These excited states are unstable, and the molecules inevitably release this excess energy to return to their ground state, their more stable and relaxed configuration. And this release of energy can take many forms, including heat, molecular vibrations, and crucially, light. Specifically, the production of biophotons is closely linked to what are known as reactive oxygen species, or ROS. These are molecules like free radicals and peroxides that are formed as byproducts of normal cellular metabolism, particularly during the process of cellular respiration, where our cells convert oxygen and glucose into energy. Now, ROS have a bit of a bad reputation, and deservedly so. In high concentrations, they can damage cellular components like DNA, proteins, and lipids, contributing to aging, inflammation, and various diseases. But ROS also play important roles in cellular signaling and defense mechanisms. They're a double-edged sword, essential for life but potentially destructive if not carefully controlled. It's during the interactions of these ROS that biofactins are often generated. When two ROS molecules collide and react, they can release energy in the form of light. This is similar to the phenomenon of chemiluminescence, where chemical reactions directly produce light, like in a glow stick. However, the emission of biofactins is far more subtle and complex than simple chemiluminescence. The light emitted is incredibly weak, and the mechanisms involved are still not fully understood. It's believed that the structure and environment of the molecules within our cells play a crucial role in shaping the properties of the emitted biophotons. For example, the unique helical structure of DNA may act as an antenna, capturing and amplifying weak light signals within the cell. This suggests that DNA isn't just a blueprint for our genetic code, but also a kind of photonic storage and communication system. It can not only retain the code, but signal when to have that code expressed. Another potential source of biophotons lies in the coherent vibrations of molecules within the cell. Every molecule vibrates at a specific frequency, and these vibrations can interact with each other, creating complex patterns of resonance and interference. When these vibrations are coherent, meaning they are synchronized and in phase with each other, they can generate electromagnetic fields, including light. Imagine a group of people all singing the same note in unison. The combined sound is much louder and more powerful than the sound of a single voice. Similarly, coherent molecular vibrations can amplify the production of biophotons, creating a stronger and more organized light signal. Furthermore, the role of water in biophaton emission is becoming increasingly apparent. Water is the most abundant molecule in our bodies, and it has unique properties that make it ideally suited to mediate biological processes. It forms intricate networks of hydrogen bonds, which can transmit energy and information throughout the cell. It's been suggested that these water networks can act as waveguides, channeling biophotons and directing them to specific locations within the cell. This would allow for efficient and targeted communication between different cellular components. So, to recap, the source of these mysterious biophotons is multifaceted and complex. It involves the interplay of biochemical reactions, reactive oxygen species, DNA structure, coherent molecular vibrations, and the unique properties of water. It's a testament to the intricate and interconnected nature of life at the cellular level. And the more we learn about these biophotons, the more we realize that they are not just random byproducts of cellular activity, but rather integral to the functioning of living organisms. They seem to be involved in everything from DNA repair to immune system regulation, from cellular growth to embryonic development. They may even play a role in consciousness and our subjective experience of the world. The full extent of their influence is still a topic of ongoing research, but early indicators are showing this is more sophisticated than originally realized. As we continue to unravel the secrets of biophotons, we may find that light plays a far more fundamental role in life than we ever imagined. We may discover that our cells are not just biological machines, but also sophisticated photonic devices, capable of communicating, coordinating, and even healing through the power of light. This is no longer the realm of science fiction. This is the cutting edge of scientific discovery. So buckle up, we're just getting started. So how did this all begin? How did scientists even stumble upon the idea that our cells might be emitting their own faint light? Well, like many groundbreaking discoveries, it wasn't a direct, planned assault on the problem. It was more of a serendipitous encounter, eh? Case of keen observation meeting fortunate timing. The story truly begins in the early 20th century, a time when the field of biophysics was still in its infancy. Scientists were starting to explore the intricate dance of energy and matter within living organisms, but their tools were relatively crude compared to what we have today. It's important to remember that much of this early work was happening before the full structure and function of DNA was understood, before advanced microscopy became commonplace, and before the sophisticated methods of cellular analysis were even dreamt of. One of the key figures in this early exploration was a Russian embryologist named Alexander Gurwitch. In the 1920s, Gurwitch was investigating cell division in onion roots. Now, onion roots might not sound like the most exciting topic, but Gurwitch had a hunch that there was more to cell division than met the eye. He wasn't satisfied with simply observing the process. He wanted to understand the forces driving it. In a now famous experiment, Gurwitch placed one onion root tip in a quartz glass tube. Quartz, unlike regular glass, is transparent to ultraviolet light. He then positioned another onion root tip perpendicular to the first, with a small gap between them. His hypothesis was that some kind of signal was being emitted from the first root tip that was influencing the growth of the second, and that's exactly what he observed. The second root tip, the one not directly exposed to visible light, showed a significantly higher rate of cell division than control routes. Gurwitch concluded that the first root tip was emitting some kind of radiation that was stimulating growth. In the second, he called this radiation mitogenetic radiation, suggesting it was related to mitosis, or cell division now. Gurwitch believed this radiation was in the ultraviolet range, and in his initial experiments, he thought that this radiation was necessary for cell division to happen. While his initial UV assessment was later deemed incorrect, the core observation was truly incredible and would hold up with better technology, naturally. His work sparked considerable excitement and debate. Other researchers attempted to replicate Gurwitch's findings with varying degrees of success. The problem was that the radiation, whatever it was incredibly weak, close to the detection limits of the instruments available at the time. This led to skepticism, with some scientists questioning the validity of Gurwitch's results. Noise of the instruments was almost as strong as the radiation itself. For a time, the idea of mitogenetic radiation faded into the background, relegated to the fringes of scientific inquiry. But the seed had been planted. The idea that cells might be communicating with each other through some form of electromagnetic radiation, however faint, remained a tantalizing possibility. The story then jumps forward several decades to the work of German biophysicist Fritzlbert Popp. In the 1970s, Popp was investigating the effects of different substances on cancer cells. He was particularly interested in how these substances interacted with DNA. Popp was using a spectrophotometer, an instrument that measures the absorption and emission of light by different substances. During his experiments, he noticed something peculiar. When certain chemicals, known to be carcinogenic, were introduced to the cells, they exhibited an unusual pattern of light emission. Conversely, non-carcinogenic substances seemed to have the opposite effect. It was as if the cells were responding to these substances by emitting their own light. Intrigued, Popp began to delve deeper into this phenomenon. He realized that the light being emitted by the cells wasn't just any kind of light. It had specific properties that distinguished it from ordinary background radiation. It was coherent, meaning that the photons were organized and synchronized like the waves of a laser beam rather than the scattered light of a light bulb. This coherence was a crucial clue. It suggested that the light wasn't just a random byproduct of cellular metabolism, but rather a form of communication, a way for cells to exchange information and coordinate their activities. Popp called this light biophotons, and his work laid the foundation for much of the modern research on biophoton emission. Now, initial findings were met with considerable skepticism, much like Gurwitch's work before him. The idea that cells could communicate with each other through light seemed far-fetched, even to some of his colleagues. The light was so faint, so difficult to detect, that many scientists dismissed it as mere noise. But Popp was persistent, continued to refine his experimental techniques, and to gather more evidence supporting his theory. He developed sophisticated equipment capable of detecting and measuring these faint biophaton emissions with greater precision. And slowly but surely, the scientific community began to take notice. The key to Pop's success was his ability to demonstrate that biophoton emission was not just a random phenomenon, but rather a fundamental property of living organisms. He showed that biophotons were present in a wide variety of cells and tissues, from bacteria to plants to animals. He also found that the intensity and pattern of biophoton emission could be influenced by various factors, such as stress, disease, and even emotions. In essence, Gurwitch laid the groundwork by demonstrating that something was being emitted from cells, even if he misidentified its nature. Pop then picked up the baton, refined the experimental methods, and identified the coherent nature of the light, providing a more compelling case for its biological significance. So, the discovery of biophoton emission wasn't a single eureka moment, but rather a gradual process of observation, experimentation, and refinement. It was a journey that began with a simple question about cell division in onion roots and led to a revolutionary understanding of the hidden light within all living things. And it's a journey that continues to this day, as scientists continue to unravel the mysteries of biophotons and their role in the complex dance of life. So how did this all begin? How did scientists even stumble upon the idea that our cells might be emitting their own faint light? Well, like many groundbreaking discoveries, it wasn't a direct, planned assault on the problem. It was more of a serendipitous encounter, a case of keen observation meeting fortunate timing. The story truly begins in the early 20th century, a time when the field of biophysics was still in its infancy. Scientists were starting to explore the intricate dance of energy and matter within living organisms, but their tools were relatively crude compared to what we have today. It's important to remember that much of this early work was happening before the full structure and function of DNA was understood, before advanced microscopy became commonplace, and before the sophisticated methods of cellular analysis were even dreamt of. One of the key figures in this early exploration was Russian embryologist named Alexander Gurwitch. In the 1920s, Gurwitch was investigating cell division in onion roots. Now, onion roots might not sound like the most exciting topic, but Gurwitch had a hunch that there was more to cell division than met the eye. He wasn't satisfied with simply observing the process. He wanted to understand the forces driving it in a now famous experiment. Gurwitch placed one onion root tip in a quartz glass tube. Quartz, unlike regular glass, is transparent to ultraviolet light. He then positioned another onion root tip perpendicular to the first with a small gap between them. His hypothesis was that some kind of signal was being emitted from the first root tip that was influencing the growth of the second. And that's exactly what he observed. The second root tip, the one not directly exposed to visible light, showed a significantly higher rate of cell division than control roots. Gurwitch concluded that the first root tip was emitting some kind of radiation that was stimulating growth. In the second, he called this radiation mitogenetic radiation, suggesting it was related to mitosis or cell division now. Gurwitch believed this radiation was in the ultraviolet range. And in his initial experiments, he thought that this radiation was necessary for cell division to happen. While his initial UV assessment was later deemed incorrect, the core observation was truly incredible and would hold up with better technology. Naturally, his work sparked considerable excitement and debate. Gurwich's findings with varying degrees of success. The problem was that the radiation, whatever it was incredibly weak, close to the detection limits of the instruments available at the time. This led to skepticism, with some scientists questioning the validity of Gurwich's results. The noise of the instruments was almost as strong as the radiation itself. For a time, the idea of mitogenetic radiation faded into the background, relegated to the fringes of scientific inquiry. But the seed had been planted. The idea that cells might be communicating with each other through some form of electromagnetic radiation, however faint, remained a tantalizing possibility. The story then jumps forward several decades to the work of German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp. In the 1970s, Popp was investigating the effects of different substances on cancer cells. He was particularly interested in how these substances interacted with DNA. Popp was using a spectrophotometer. It's an instrument that measures the absorption and emission of light by different substances. During his experiments, he noticed something peculiar when certain chemicals known to be carcinogenic were introduced to the cells. They exhibited an unusual pattern of light emission. Conversely, non-carcinogenic substances didn't produce this effect. This unexpected observation led Popp down a rabbit hole, a quest to understand the nature of this light and its potential role in biological processes. Popp, inspired by Gurwich's earlier work, hypothesized that these light emissions weren't just random byproducts of cellular metabolism. He believed they were coherent, meaning they exhibited a degree of order and coordination that suggested a specific function. This coherence, he argued, was a sign that the light was being used for communication within the cells. Now, it's important to remember the historical context here. Quantum physics was still a relatively new and somewhat controversial field. Idea that quantum phenomena might play a significant role in biological processes was considered radical by many. But Popp was undeterred. He saw a connection between the coherent light emissions and the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. He proposed that DNA, the very blueprint of life, might be a source of biophotons, and that these biophotons could be used to transmit information and coordinate activity within the cell. He even suggested that biophotons could play a role in regulating gene expression and maintaining the integrity of the genetic code. Popp's ideas were initially met with skepticism from the scientific community. The light emissions were so faint and difficult to measure that many researchers dismissed them as mere background noise, and the idea that quantum coherence could exist within the warm, wet environment of a living cell seemed far-fetched to some. But Popp persisted, refining his experimental techniques and gathering more and more evidence to support his hypothesis. He developed highly sensitive detectors that could measure even the faintest light emissions from cells. He also conducted experiments to test the effects of different substances on biophoton emission, finding that substances that promoted health and well-being tended to increase coherence, while those that were harmful tended to decrease it. Over time, Popp's work began to gain traction. Other researchers started to replicate his findings, and the idea of biophotons as a form of cellular communication gradually gained acceptance. Today, biophoton research is a growing field, with scientists around the world investigating the role of these faint light emissions in a wide range of biological processes. While Gurwich didn't have the technology to see that his radiation was biophotonic in nature, he opened the door for the future discovery. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. In fact, it takes a fascinating turn with the work of German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp. In the 1970s, Popp was investigating the effects of different substances on cancer cells. He was particularly interested in how these substances interacted with DNA. Now, Popp wasn't necessarily looking for biophotons at this point. He was using a spectrophotometer, an instrument that measures the absorption and emission of light by different substances. During his experiments, he noticed something peculiar, something that simply didn't fit the conventional understanding of cellular biology. When certain chemicals, known to be carcinogenic, were introduced to the cells, they exhibited an unusual pattern of light emission. Conversely, non-carcinogenic substances seemed to have a different effect on this light emission. This wasn't just a simple case of more light or less light. It was about the quality, the pattern, the organization of the light. Popp found that carcinogenic substances disrupted the coherent, harmonious light emitted by healthy cells. It was as if these substances were throwing the cellular communication system into disarray, scrambling the signals and disrupting the flow of information. On the other hand, non-carcinogenic substances seem to have little effect on this coherent light, or in some cases even enhance it. Intrigued by these findings, Pop began to delve deeper into the nature of this light. He started exploring the possibility that cells were not just emitting light as a byproduct of chemical reactions, but that they were actually using this light to communicate with each other. He theorized that this light, which he called biophotons, was a key element in the regulation of biological processes, a kind of internal communication network that coordinated activity within the organism. Now, this was a radical idea at the time, one that challenged the prevailing view of life as a purely chemical process. But Pop was relentless in his pursuit of evidence, meticulously conducting experiment after experiment, refining his techniques, and gathering more and more data to support his theory. One of the key experiments that helped solidify his ideas involved comparing the biophoton emissions of healthy cells with those of cancer cells. He discovered that cancer cells emitted significantly less coherent light than healthy cells. In other words, the light emitted by cancer cells was more disorganized, or chaotic, less able to carry meaningful information. This finding suggested that a loss of coherence in biophoton emissions might be a characteristic of cancer, a sign that the cellular communication system had broken down. It also raised the possibility that measuring biophoton emissions could be a way to detect cancer early on, before it becomes clinically apparent. Pop also investigated the effects of natural light on biophoton emissions. He found that exposure to sunlight, in particular, could enhance the coherence of biophoton emissions in cells and organisms. This led him to believe that sunlight plays a crucial role in regulating biological processes, providing the energy and information needed to maintain health and vitality. Now imagine the implications of this. The sun, the source of all life on Earth, might not just be providing us with warmth and energy, but also with a vital form of information that our cells need to function properly. It's like we are batteries that can be recharged. Pop's work didn't stop there. He went on to explore the role of biophotons in a wide range of biological phenomena, from DNA repair to wound healing, from embryonic development to immune system function. He even investigated the possibility that biophotons play a role in consciousness, suggesting that our thoughts and emotions might be linked to the electromagnetic fields generated by our brains. Understandably, Pop's ideas were met with skepticism from some corners of the scientific community. The concept of biophoton communication was, and still is, considered controversial by some. The challenges of detecting and measuring these faint emissions, the complexity of biological systems, and the difficulty of controlling for all the variables involved in these experiments have made it difficult to obtain definitive proof of Pop's theories. However, despite the skepticism, Pop's work has inspired a new generation of researchers to explore the potential of biophotons in medicine and biology. Scientists around the world are now using advanced techniques to study biophoton emissions in a variety of systems, from plants and bacteria to human cells and tissues. They are investigating the potential of biophoton-based therapies for treating cancer, wound healing, and other conditions. They are also exploring the use of biophoton imaging to diagnose diseases early on and monitor the effectiveness of treatments. The story of Fritz Albert Pop is a testament to the power of curiosity, persistence, and independent thinking. He dared to challenge conventional wisdom, to ask difficult questions, and to pursue his ideas with unwavering dedication, even in the face of criticism and skepticism. His work has opened up a new frontier in our understanding of life, a frontier where light and information play a central role in the orchestration of biological processes, and it all stemmed from noticing a peculiar light pattern in his research. Now, what does all this have to do with emotions? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because if biophotons are involved in cellular communication and the regulation of biological processes, then it's reasonable to ask whether they might also be influenced by our emotions. Could our feelings, our thoughts, our mental states somehow affect the light that our cells emit? Could our emotions be encoded in the biophoton emissions of our bodies? That's what we will be exploring next, as we delve into the subjective human experience. Have you ever truly stopped to consider the sheer, overwhelming complexity of a single human feeling? It's almost impossible, isn't it? We navigate our lives, propelled by emotions that are both intensely personal and universally shared, often without ever pausing to fully unpack what they are, where they come from, and why they hold such sway over us. Emotions are the color palette of our experiences. They paint our memories, influence our decisions, and shape our relationships. They can be a whisper of contentment, a surge of exhilaration, a wave of crushing sadness, or a burning inferno of rage. They're the internal weather system that dictates our moods and behaviors. But what are emotions, really? Are they simply chemical reactions in the brain? Are they learned responses to external stimuli? Are they something deeper, something more intrinsically tied to our sense of self? The truth is, emotions are incredibly multifaceted, defying any single, simple definition. They're a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. They're subjective experiences, meaning they're filtered through the lens of our individual personalities, histories, and beliefs. The way I experience joy might be very different from how you experience joy, even if we're both responding to the same external event. Think about it. Imagine you're walking down a street and suddenly encounter a dog barking aggressively. One person might experience a surge of fear, their heart racing, their palms sweating, ready to flee. Another person, perhaps someone who grew up with dogs, or has a particular fondness for them, might feel a mild sense of caution, but also curiosity, maybe even a little amusement. The stimulus is the same, the barking dog, but the emotional response is vastly different. This highlights the crucial point that emotions aren't just about what happens to us. They're about how we interpret what happens to us. We're constantly evaluating the world around us, assessing threats, opportunities, and potential rewards. And these evaluations, often happening subconsciously in milliseconds, trigger a cascade of physiological and psychological responses that we experience as emotions. It's this subjective nature of emotions that makes them so fascinating and so difficult to study. We can measure brain activity, heart rate, and hormone levels, but we can't directly access another person's inner experience. We can only rely on their self-reported feelings, their facial expressions, their body language, and infer what they might be going through. And that brings us to the heart of the challenge. How do we even begin to understand something so intensely personal, so inherently subjective? Well, we start by acknowledging that emotions are not monolithic entities. They're not just abstract concepts floating around in our minds. They're grounded in our bodies, in our brains, and in our interactions with the world. Let's consider the physiological component. When we experience an emotion, our bodies react in predictable ways. Fear triggers the release of adrenaline, preparing us for fight or flight. Sadness can lead to a decrease in energy and a slowing down of bodily functions. Joy can manifest as increased heart rate, flushed skin, and a general sense of well-being. These physiological responses are not just random side effects. They're an integral part of the emotional experience. They provide us with information about our internal state and prepare us to respond to the situation at hand. Then there's the cognitive component. Emotions are intimately linked to our thoughts and beliefs. The way we interpret a situation directly influences the emotion we experience. For example, if you believe that failure is unacceptable, you're more likely to experience anxiety when faced with a challenging task. If you believe that you're capable and resilient, you're more likely to approach the same task with confidence and determination. Our thoughts act as a filter, shaping our emotional reality. And finally, there's the social component. Emotions are not just internal experiences. They're also social signals. They communicate our needs, intentions, and feelings to others. Facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice all convey emotional information, allowing us to connect with others, build relationships, and navigate social situations. Think about how easily you can recognize a smile, a frown, or a look of surprise. These are universal emotional expressions that transcend cultural boundaries, allowing us to understand each other on a fundamental level. So emotions are not just feelings. They're complex, multifaceted experiences that involve our bodies, our minds, and our social interactions. They're subjective, personal, and deeply ingrained in the fabric of our lives. And while they can sometimes be overwhelming or confusing, they're also essential for our survival, our well-being, and our ability to connect with others. Without emotions, our world would be a dull, colorless, and ultimately meaningless place. It's the spice of life, and it's this intricate dance of biology, psychology, and social interaction that makes the study of emotions so compelling and so vital to understanding ourselves. Now, before we dive deeper into the science of emotions, let's take a moment to really understand what we're talking about. What are emotions? And how do we even begin to categorize something so deeply personal and subjective? It's a question that philosophers and scientists have grappled with for centuries. And while there's no single, universally accepted answer, we can certainly explore some key frameworks at its core. An emotion is a complex psychological state that involves a subjective experience, that feeling we recognize as happiness, sadness, anger, or fear, for example. But emotions are more than just feelings. They also involve physiological responses, like changes in heart rate, breathing, and hormone levels. And they often trigger behavioral responses, like smiling, crying, or running away. Think about it. When you're suddenly confronted by a large barking dog, you don't just feel fear. Your heart starts racing, your palms sweat, your muscles tense, and you might instinctively take a step back, ready to flee. That's the full package of an emotional response. The feeling, the physiological changes, and the behavior all intertwined. Now, one of the ongoing debates in the field of emotion research is whether there are truly basic emotions. Are there a set of fundamental, universal emotional experiences that all humans share, regardless of culture or background? And if so, what are they? One of the most influential figures in this area was Paul Ekman, psychologist who conducted groundbreaking research on facial expressions and emotions in the 1960s and 70s. Ekman traveled the world, studying different cultures, including isolated tribes in Papua New Guinea who had had very little contact with Western civilization. He showed them pictures of people displaying different facial expressions and asked them to identify the emotion being expressed. Remarkably, he found a high degree of agreement across cultures in recognizing certain emotions. This led him to propose that there are indeed a set of basic emotions that are universally expressed and recognized. Initially, Kuhlman identified 6 basic emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust. These emotions, he argued, are innate, meaning we are born with the capacity to experience and express them. They are also associated with distinct facial expressions that are readily recognized by people from different cultures. Let's break these down a little. Happiness is often expressed through a smile, with the corners of the mouth turned up and the cheeks raised. It's an emotion associated with pleasure, joy, and contentment. Sadness, on the other hand, is typically characterized by a downturned mouth, furrowed brow, and a general drooping of the facial features. It's an emotion linked to loss, grief, and disappointment. Anger is often expressed through a furrowed brow, tightened lips, and flared nostrils. It's an emotion associated with frustration, irritation, and resentment. Fear is characterized by widened eyes, raised eyebrows, and an open mouth. It's an emotion linked to threat, danger, and anxiety. Surprise is often expressed through raised eyebrows, widened eyes, and an open mouth, similar to fear but typically more fleeting. It's an emotion associated with novelty, unexpectedness, and astonishment. And finally, disgust is typically characterized by a wrinkled nose, raised upper lip, and narrowed eyes. It's an emotion associated with revulsion, aversion, and distaste. Now, it's important to note that Ekman's list of basic emotions has evolved over time. He later added other emotions to the list, including contempt, shame, embarrassment, and excitement. And other researchers have proposed different sets of basic emotions based on their own theoretical frameworks and empirical findings. For example, some researchers argue that there are only two fundamental dimensions of emotion: valence, which refers to how positive or negative the emotion is, and arousal, which refers to how activating or deactivating the emotion is. According to this view, all other emotions are simply combinations of these two basic dimensions. So, happiness would be considered a high-valence, high-arousal emotion. Sadness would be considered a low-valence, low-arousal emotion. Fear would be considered a low-valence, high-arousal emotion, and so on. Another popular framework is the Wheel of Emotions, developed by psychologist Robert Plutchik. Plutch proposed that there are 8 basic emotions arranged in a circle: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. Also argued that these basic emotions can combine to form more complex emotions, just like primary colors can combine to form secondary colors. For example, joy and trust can combine to form love, while fear and surprise can combine to form awe. The key takeaway here is that there's no single, definitive list of basic emotions. The field is still evolving, and researchers continue to debate the nature and organization of emotions. What is clear, though, is that emotions are fundamental to the human experience. They shape our perceptions, influence our decisions, and drive our behavior. Understanding them is crucial to understanding ourselves, and while identifying the core universal emotions is fascinating, it's also worth acknowledging that emotions are also incredibly complex and nuanced. They can vary in intensity, duration, and context, and they can be influenced by a variety of factors, including our individual personalities, our past experiences, and our cultural backgrounds. Think about grief, for example. Grief is often described as a form of sadness, but it's so much more than that. It's a complex and multifaceted emotion that can involve a wide range of feelings, including sadness, anger, guilt, regret, and even relief. And the experience of grief can vary greatly from person to person, depending on the nature of the loss, the individual's coping style, and their cultural beliefs. Similarly, the experience of anger can vary greatly depending on the situation. Anger can range from mild irritation to intense rage, and it can be expressed in a variety of ways, from passive-aggressive behavior to outright aggression. So, while it's helpful to think about basic emotions as a starting point, it's important to remember that emotions are rarely experienced in isolation. They often blend together to create complex and nuanced emotional states. They are always influenced by the context in which they occur. So as we move forward, keep these fundamental emotions in mind. They are the building blocks upon which the rich tapestry of human feeling is woven. We'll start to look at the scientific side, getting in depth with the way the brain and body handle each emotion. Buckle up. All right, let's dive into where the magic or, the science really happens. I'm talking about the brain, of course, specifically the key areas that light up when we experience different emotions. Think of it as mapping the brain's emotional landscape. It's not as simple as saying this part equals happiness, because, spoiler alert, it's way more complex than that. But we can identify some major players. For years, scientists have been trying to figure out exactly where emotions reside in the brain. Early theories, like the one proposed by Paul Braca, focused on specific regions like the limbic system. The limbic system, often called the emotional brain, was thought to be the be-all and end-all of feelings. And it is important. But modern research has shown that emotions are actually processed by a much wider network of brain regions working together. It's more like an emotional orchestra than a single instrument playing a solo. So where do we start our tour? Oh, a great place to begin is with the amygdala. You've probably heard of it. The amygdala, almond-shaped and nestled deep within the temporal lobes, is often dubbed the brain's fear center. And while that's a catchy name, it's a bit of an oversimplification. Yes, the amygdala plays a crucial role in processing fear, anxiety, and threat detection. But it's also involved in processing other emotions, like pleasure and reward. Think of it as the brain's emotional alarm system. It's constantly scanning the environment for potential threats and opportunities. When it detects something significant, it triggers a cascade of physiological and behavioral responses, like increased heart rate, sweating, and a sudden urge to run for the hills or, grab that delicious slice of cake. But it's not just about the amygdala reacting to the outside world. It also helps us form emotional memories. Remember that time you touched a hot stove as a kid? That searing pain is stored in your memory, and the amygdala plays a key role in associating that memory with the feeling of fear. That's why even years later, you might feel a twinge of anxiety when you see a hot stove. It's your amygdala reminding you, hey, remember what happened last time? Be careful. Okay, so the amygdala is important for detecting and responding to emotional stimuli. But what about experiencing those emotions consciously? That's where another key brain region comes into play, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. This is the brain's control center, located right behind your forehead. It's responsible for higher-level cognitive functions like planning, decision-making, and, crucially, emotional regulation. The PFC helps us to understand and interpret our emotions and to control our responses to them. It's what allows us to, take a deep breath and think rationally, instead of just reacting impulsively to our feelings. Think of the PFC as the wise, older sibling of the amygdala. The amygdala might shout, danger, run away, but the PFC can step in and say, wait a minute, is that really a threat? Or is it just a shadow? It's the PFC that allows us to evaluate the situation, weigh the consequences, and choose a more appropriate response. Now, the PFC isn't a monolith. It's actually made up of several different subregions, each with its own specific role in emotional processing. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC, is particularly important for decision-making and emotional regulation. It helps us to connect our emotions to our actions and to make choices that are consistent with our values and goals. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC, on the other hand, is more involved in working memory and cognitive control. It helps us to focus our attention, resist distractions, and keep our emotions in check. But the amygdala and PFC aren't the only players in the emotional brain. Other regions, like the hippocampus, the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, and the insula, also play important roles. The hippocampus, located next to the amygdala, is crucial for forming and retrieving memories, including emotional memories. It helps us to contextualize our emotions, to understand where they come from, and to predict how they might unfold in the future. The ACC, located in the front of the brain, is involved in error detection, conflict monitoring, and emotional awareness. It helps us to recognize when we're making a mistake, when we're experiencing conflicting emotions, and when we need to adjust our behavior. And the insula, located deep within the brain, is responsible for processing bodily sensations, including those associated with emotions. It's what allows us to feel the physical sensations of a racing heart, a churning stomach, or sweaty palms when we're experiencing strong emotions. The insula gives us that gut feeling, that visceral sense of what's happening inside our bodies. It's also worth mentioning the role of neurotransmitters. These chemical messengers play a vital role in regulating our emotions. Serotonin, for example, is often associated with feelings of happiness and well-being. Dopamine is linked to reward and motivation, while norepinephrine is involved in the fight-or-flight response. These neurotransmitters act as the brain's emotional fuel. It's influencing how we experience and respond to different situations. Think of them as fine-tuning the emotional orchestra, ensuring that all the instruments are playing in harmony. So, as you can see, the neuroscience of emotions is incredibly complex. It's not just about one brain region or one neurotransmitter. It's about a dynamic interplay of different brain regions, neurotransmitters, and physiological systems working together to create our subjective emotional experiences. And while we've made a lot of progress in understanding the brain's emotional circuitry, there's still much that we don't know. Research is ongoing, constantly revealing new insights into the intricate workings of the emotional brain. We're always learning new information. The hope is that this knowledge will lead to more effective treatments for mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and to a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. Because at the end of the day, Emotions are what make us human. They shape our experiences, drive our behaviors, and connect us to one another. So understanding the neuroscience of emotions is not just about understanding the brain. It's about understanding ourselves. Okay, let's delve into one of the most critical components of our emotional circuitry, the amygdala. You can think of the amygdala as the brain's rapid response team for fear and threat. It's the part of your brain that's constantly scanning the environment, asking the silent question, is this safe? And it's crucial to our survival now. The amygdala isn't just one thing. It's actually a cluster of nuclei, almond-shaped structures nestled deep within. The temporal lobes of your brain, you have one on each side. These little almond-shaped structures might seem insignificant, but they play a colossal role in how we experience and respond to the world, especially when it comes to things we perceive as dangerous or frightening. Imagine you're walking through a forest, enjoying the peace and quiet, when suddenly you hear a rustling in the bushes. Before you even consciously register what it is, your heart starts to pound, your palms get sweaty, and your muscles tense. That's your amygdala kicking into high gear. It's like an alarm system that goes off before you even have time to fully process what's happening. This rapid response is possible because the amygdala receives sensory information through two pathways. One pathway is the high road, which is slower but more accurate. This route sends sensory information first to the thalamus, the brain's sensory relay station, and then to the cortex, the thinking, reasoning part of the brain. The cortex then analyzes the information in detail and sends a message back to the amygdala. The other pathway is the low road, which is much faster, but less precise. This route sends sensory information directly from the thalamus to the amygdala, bypassing the cortex altogether. This shortcut allows the amygdala to react almost instantaneously to potential threats, even before you're consciously aware of them. Think of it this way. The high road is like carefully reading a map before deciding which way to go. The low road is like relying on your gut instinct to get you out of a dangerous situation quickly. The low road is why you might jump at a shadow in a dark alleyway, even if your conscious mind knows it's just a shadow. The amygdala has already triggered a fear response before your cortex has had a chance to analyze the situation and tell you there's nothing to worry about. It's a better safe than sorry approach, and it's been incredibly useful for our survival. Throughout evolution, now, what happens when the amygdala detects a threat? Well, it sets off a cascade of physiological changes designed to help you survive. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight-or-flight response. This leads to the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which increase your heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing rate. Your senses become heightened, your muscles tense, and you're ready to either fight for your life or run away as fast as you can. But the amygdala's role isn't just limited to triggering the fight-or-flight response. It's also heavily involved in learning and remembering emotional events, especially those associated with fear. When you experience something frightening, the amygdala helps to create a strong association between the event and the fear response. This is why you might develop a phobia after a traumatic experience. For example, if you were attacked by a dog as a child, your amygdala might create a strong association between dogs and fear. As a result, you might experience anxiety or panic whenever you see a dog, even if it's a friendly, well-behaved one. The amygdala is essentially saying, remember what happened last time? This could be dangerous. Its ability to learn and remember. Fear is crucial for survival as it allows us to avoid potentially dangerous situations in the future. However, it can also lead to problems like anxiety disorders and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. In people with anxiety disorders, amygdala may be overactive or overly sensitive, leading to excessive fear responses to situations that aren't actually dangerous. In people with PTSD, the amygdala may be triggered by reminders of a traumatic event, causing them to relive the experience over and over again. So, the amygdala is a complex and powerful structure that plays a vital role in our emotional lives. It's our brain's rapid response system for fear and threat, helping us to survive in a dangerous world. But it can also be a source of anxiety and distress when it's not functioning properly. Understanding How the amygdala works is essential for understanding the science of emotions and for developing effective treatments for anxiety disorders and PTSD. It's a reminder that our emotions, while subjective experiences, are deeply rooted in the biological structures of our brains, structures that have evolved over millions of years to keep us safe and alive. And while sometimes that safety comes at the cost of constant vigilance, it's a testament to the complex machinery that makes us human. The amygdala is not just a fear center, it's a survival center, constantly working to protect us from harm, even when that harm is only perceived. In the next section, we'll shift our focus to another crucial brain region involved in emotions. The prefrontal cortex. This area is often considered the rational brain, and it plays a vital role in regulating our emotions and helping us to make more thoughtful and reasoned decisions. We'll explore how the prefrontal cortex interacts with the amygdala and how this interaction can help us to manage our fears and anxieties, okay? So we've talked about the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, the part that reacts quickly and instinctively to perceived threats. But what about the part of your brain that helps you pause, evaluate, and respond in a more measured way? That's where the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, comes in. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the rational brain's headquarters, the center for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and working memory. It's located right behind your forehead, and it's one of the last brain regions to fully develop, often not reaching full maturity until our mid-20s. This is why teenagers and young adults sometimes struggle with impulse control and long-term planning. Their prefrontal cortex is still under construction, so to speak. But here's the crucial part for our discussion. The prefrontal cortex plays a critical role in emotional regulation. It helps us manage and modulate our emotions, preventing us from being completely overwhelmed by our initial reactions. It's the voice of reason that whispers, "Okay, you're feeling anxious, but take a deep breath. What's the most rational way to handle this situation?" Now, how does the prefrontal cortex actually do this? Well, it's all about connections, specifically the intricate network of connections between the PFC and other brain regions, especially the amygdala. The PFC can exert a top-down influence on the amygdala, essentially telling it to calm down when it's overreacting. Imagine the amygdala as a smoke detector and the prefrontal cortex as the person who checks to see if there's actually a fire before calling the fire department. If the smoke detector goes off because someone burned toast, the person representing the PFC can override the alarm. Similarly, the PFC can help to inhibit the amygdala's fear response when it's triggered by something that isn't actually dangerous. This inhibitory control is essential for managing anxiety, fear, and other negative emotions. It allows us to distinguish between real threats and perceived threats, and to respond accordingly. For example, if you're giving a presentation and you feel your heart racing, your prefrontal cortex can help you recognize that the situation isn't life-threatening and that your anxiety is likely due to performance pressure. It can then help you use coping strategies like deep breathing or positive self-talk to calm your nerves and focus on the task at hand. But the prefrontal cortex doesn't just work by inhibiting the amygdala. It also plays a role in reappraisal, which is the process of changing how we think about a situation in order to change how we feel about it. This is like reframing a negative experience in a more positive light. Let's say you didn't get the job you interviewed for. Your initial reaction might be disappointment, sadness, or even anger. But your prefrontal cortex can help you reappraise the situation by focusing on the positive aspects, such as the valuable experience you gained during the interview process, or the opportunity to pursue other, potentially even better, opportunities. Research has shown that people who are skilled at reappraisal tend to experience fewer negative emotions and have better overall mental health. This is because reappraisal allows us to take control of our emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. Now, there are different parts of the prefrontal cortex that contribute to emotional regulation in slightly different ways. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC, is involved in cognitive control and working memory. It helps us hold information in mind and use it to guide our behavior, even when we're feeling emotional. Think of it as the part of the brain that helps you stick to your goals, even when you're tempted to give in to your impulses. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or FMPFC, is involved in processing emotions and making value judgments. It helps us weigh the potential rewards and risks of different actions, and to make decisions that are consistent with our values. It's also involved in extinction learning, which is the process of learning that a previously threatening stimulus is no longer dangerous. This is important for overcoming phobias and anxiety disorders. The orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC, is involved in processing social and emotional information and in regulating social behavior. It helps us understand the emotions of others and to respond appropriately in social situations. It's also involved in impulse control and decision-making, particularly in situations that involve rewards and punishments. So as you can see, the prefrontal cortex is a complex and multifaceted brain region that plays a crucial role in emotional regulation. It helps us to inhibit our initial emotional reactions, reappraise situations in a more positive light, make decisions that are consistent with our goals and values. But what happens when the prefrontal cortex isn't functioning properly? That can lead to a variety of emotional and behavioral problems, including anxiety, depression, impulsivity, and difficulty controlling emotions. Studies have shown that people with anxiety disorders often have reduced activity in their prefrontal cortex, which may explain why they have difficulty inhibiting their fear responses. Similarly, people with depression often have reduced activity in their VMPFC, which may contribute to their negative mood and difficulty experiencing pleasure. Damage to the prefrontal cortex, such as from a stroke or traumatic brain injury, can also have a significant impact on emotional regulation. People with prefrontal cortex damage may become more impulsive, irritable, and prone to emotional outbursts. Fortunately, there are things we can do to improve the function of our prefrontal cortex and enhance our emotional regulation skills. One of the most effective strategies is mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment, which can help to strengthen the connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Have shown that regular mindfulness meditation practice can increase activity in the prefrontal cortex and decrease activity in the amygdala, leading to improved emotional regulation and reduced anxiety. Another effective strategy is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT is a type of therapy that helps people identify and change negative thought patterns and behaviors that contribute to emotional problems. CBT can help to strengthen the prefrontal cortex's ability to reappraise situations and to develop more adaptive coping strategies. Other things that can help to improve prefrontal cortex function include getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and engaging in regular exercise. All of these activities can help to improve overall brain health, which can in turn enhance emotional regulation. So the prefrontal cortex is a powerful tool for managing our emotions. It's by understanding how it works and taking steps to improve its function, we can gain greater control over our emotional lives and improve our overall well-being. It's about building that connection, strengthening the communication lines, and training our brain to respond rather than simply react. It's not about suppressing emotions, but about understanding and managing them effectively. That's a skill that benefits all of us. Now, we've talked about the brain regions involved in emotions, but what about the chemical messengers that actually carry those emotional signals? Think of neurotransmitters as the tiny couriers of the brain, zipping back and forth between neurons to deliver vital information. And when it comes to emotions, 3 neurotransmitters play particularly crucial roles: serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Let's start with serotonin. Serotonin is often dubbed the happiness neurotransmitter. And while that's a bit of an oversimplification, it's not entirely inaccurate. Serotonin plays a significant role in regulating mood, sleep, appetite, and even digestion. Levels are healthy and balanced. We tend to feel more stable, content, and optimistic. Imagine a finely tuned orchestra. Serotonin is like the conductor, ensuring that all the different instruments are playing in harmony. When serotonin is lacking, the orchestra falls out of tune, leading to feelings of anxiety, depression, and irritability. Think of those days When you feel inexplicably down, or when your patience is wearing thin, low serotonin levels might be playing a role. But serotonin's influence extends beyond just mood. It also affects our sleep-wake cycle, helping us to fall asleep and stay asleep. A deficiency in serotonin can contribute to insomnia and other sleep disorders. And because serotonin is also involved in regulating appetite, low levels can lead to cravings for carbohydrates and sugary foods. It's all connected, you see. Our brains and bodies function as an amazing holistic system. Now, what about dopamine? Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation. It's released when we experience something pleasurable, whether it's eating a delicious meal, achieving a goal, or spending time with loved ones. Dopamine acts as a powerful reinforcement signal, encouraging us to repeat behaviors that lead to positive outcomes. Think of dopamine as the brain's personal trainer, pushing you to strive for success. When you accomplish something, dopamine floods your brain, creating a sense of satisfaction and motivating you to keep going. This reward system is essential for learning, motivation, and overall well-being. However, dopamine is also a double-edged sword. Because it's so strongly associated with pleasure, it can be easily hijacked by addictive substances and behaviors. Drugs like cocaine and amphetamines flood the brain with dopamine, creating an intense high that is difficult to resist. This can lead to addiction and a desensitization of the dopamine system. It's making it harder to experience pleasure from natural rewards. But dopamine's role isn't limited to just pleasure and reward. It's also crucial for motor control, attention, and decision-making. In fact, a deficiency in dopamine is associated with Parkinson's disease, a neurological disorder that affects movement. So as you can see, dopamine is involved in a wide range of functions, making it a vital neurotransmitter for both physical and mental health. Finally, let's turn our attention to norepinephrine. Norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline, is the neurotransmitter of alertness, focus, and the fight-or-flight response. When we face a stressful or dangerous situation, norepinephrine is released, preparing our bodies to take action. Imagine you're walking down a dark street, and suddenly you hear a strange noise behind you. Your heart starts racing, your breathing quickens, and your senses become heightened. This is norepinephrine at work, priming you to either confront the threat or escape from it. Norepinephrine increases heart rate, blood pressure, and energy levels, allowing us to react quickly and decisively in the face of danger. It also enhances our attention and focus, helping us to concentrate on the task at hand. However, chronic stress can lead to an overstimulation of the norepinephrine system, resulting in anxiety, irritability, and difficulty sleeping. So you can see how this one, like the other two, when out of whack, can ruin our calm now. It's important to understand that these three neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, don't operate in isolation. They interact with each other in complex ways, influencing a wide range of emotional and cognitive processes. For example, serotonin can modulate the release of dopamine, and dopamine can affect the activity of norepinephrine. It's like a complex ecosystem, with each neurotransmitter playing a unique but interconnected role. Think of it as a three-legged stool. Each leg represents a different neurotransmitter, and if one leg is weak or broken, the entire stool becomes unstable. So how can we ensure that our neurotransmitter systems are functioning optimally? Well, there are several things we can do, from lifestyle changes to medical interventions. Regular exercise, a healthy diet, and sufficient sleep are all crucial for maintaining balanced neurotransmitter levels. Exercise in particular has been shown to increase the release of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, leading to improved mood, energy, and cognitive function. A healthy diet rich in fruits, vegetables, and lean protein provides the building blocks for neurotransmitter synthesis. Insufficient sleep allows the brain to repair and replenish its neurotransmitter stores. In some cases, medical interventions, such as antidepressant medications, may be necessary to restore neurotransmitter balance. Selective serotonin reuptake. Inhibitors, or SSRIs, are commonly prescribed to treat depression and anxiety by increasing the availability of serotonin in the brain. However, it's important to remember that medication is just one tool in the toolbox. Lifestyle changes, therapy, and mindfulness practices can also play a significant role in managing emotions and improving overall well-being. I think that as a culture, we have jumped to the medical toolbox without first trying the lifestyle changes. In the long run, lifestyle changes will always be the correct starting point. Understanding the role of neurotransmitters and emotions is a crucial step towards understanding ourselves. And by learning how these chemical messengers influence our moods, motivations, and behaviors, we can take proactive steps to promote emotional well-being and lead more fulfilling lives. It's about understanding our inner chemistry and learning how to optimize it for happiness and resilience. And it's an amazing journey of self-discovery, one that can empower us to take control of our emotional lives. All right, so we've journeyed through the brain, pinpointed the emotional epicenters, and explored the neurotransmitter highways. But what happens after those signals fire? How do feelings translate into the tangible, physical sensations that we experience? That's what we're diving into now, the physiology of emotions, how emotions manifest in the body. Think about fear for a second. Imagine you're walking alone at night and you hear a sudden, unexpected noise behind you. What happens? Your heart starts pounding, your breath quickens, your palms get sweaty, and your muscles tense. Maybe you even freeze, completely paralyzed by the adrenaline surge. These aren't just mental experiences. They are concrete physiological changes, happening in real time. These changes are orchestrated by a complex interplay of the nervous system, the endocrine system, and various organ systems. The brain, having identified a potential threat, immediately kicks off a cascade of physiological responses designed to prepare you for action, either to fight or to flee. This fight or flight response is a prime example of how emotions directly impact our physical state. But it's not just fear. All emotions, from joy to sadness to anger, have distinct physiological signatures. Happiness might manifest as a feeling of lightness, an increase in energy, and a genuine smile that crinkles the corners of your eyes. Sadness might bring a lump to your throat, a heaviness in your chest, and a tendency to withdraw from social interaction. Anger can lead to muscle tension, a flushed face, and an urge to lash out. So how does this all work? Let's start with the basics. Our bodies are equipped with a sophisticated communication network called the nervous system, which is divided into two main parts: the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous. SYSTEM, everything else. It's the peripheral nervous system that relays information to and from the brain and the rest of the body. That is where the action lies for the physical reaction to emotions. Within the peripheral nervous system, we find the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. This is like the autopilot of our body, controlling functions like heart rate, digestion, breathing, and blood pressure, all without us having to consciously think about it. The autonomic nervous system has two main branches: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. You've probably heard of them before. Think of them as the gas pedal and the brakes. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for activating the fight or flight response. When faced with a perceived threat, like that scary noise in the dark, the amygdala sends signals to the hypothalamus, which then activates the sympathetic nervous system. This triggers the release of hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline, which ramp up heart rate, increase blood flow to muscles, dilate pupils, and divert energy away from non-essential functions like digestion. It's basically preparing your body for immediate action. It's giving you a surge of energy and heightened awareness. On the other hand, the parasympathetic nervous system promotes the rest and digest response. It counteracts the effects of the sympathetic nervous system, slowing down heart rate, lowering blood pressure, stimulating digestion, and promoting relaxation. Think of it as the system that helps you calm down after the threat has passed. It's the system that allows you to relax and recover. However, the physiological response to emotions goes beyond the autonomic nervous system. The endocrine system, a network of glands that produce hormones, also plays a crucial role. Hormones are chemical messengers that travel through the bloodstream and influence various bodily functions. In the context of emotions, hormones like cortisol and oxytocin are particularly important. Cortisol, it's often referred to as the stress hormone, is released by the adrenal glands in response to stress. It helps regulate blood sugar levels, suppress the immune system, and mobilize energy. While cortisol is essential for dealing with acute stress, chronic stress and prolonged cortisol exposure can have negative effects on health, contributing to anxiety, depression, and other physical ailments. Oxytocin, on the other hand, is often called the love hormone or the bonding hormone. It's released during social interactions, physical touch, and childbirth. It promotes feelings of trust, connection, and empathy. Oxytocin helps strengthen social bonds, reduce anxiety, and promote a sense of well-being. It plays a vital role in social behavior and emotional regulation. It's important to note that these physiological responses are not always consciously controlled. In many cases, they happen automatically and unconsciously. You don't have to tell your heart to beat faster when you're scared. It just happens. And you don't have to consciously decide to sweat when you're nervous. It's an involuntary response. This is because these responses are deeply ingrained in our brains and bodies, shaped by millions of years of evolution. The connection between emotions and physiology is not a one-way street. It's a reciprocal relationship. Not only do emotions influence our physical state, but our physical state can also influence our emotions. Think about how exercise can boost your mood, how a warm bath can help you relax, or how deep breathing can calm your anxiety. These are all examples of how manipulating our physical state can impact our emotional well-being. Moreover, the physiological response to emotions can vary depending on individual differences, cultural factors, and past experiences. Some people are naturally more reactive than others, experiencing more intense physiological responses to emotional stimuli. Cultural norms can also influence how we express and regulate our emotions, which in turn can affect our physiological responses. And past experiences can shape our emotional associations, leading to conditioned responses to certain stimuli. For example, someone who has experienced a traumatic event might have a heightened startle response or a more pronounced physiological reaction to reminders of the trauma. This is because the brain has learned to associate certain stimuli with danger, triggering a rapid and intense physiological response even in the absence of an actual threat. Understanding the physiology of emotions is crucial for understanding the complexities of human experience. It helps us appreciate how deeply intertwined our minds and bodies are, and how emotions can have a profound impact on our physical health and well-being. By learning about the physiological mechanisms underlying emotions, we can gain valuable insights into how to manage stress, regulate our moods, improve our overall quality of life. And it's not just about understanding ourselves, it's about understanding others too. Recognizing the physical signs of emotions in others, the furrowed brow of concern, flushed cheeks of embarrassment, the trembling hands of fear, can help us to empathize with their experiences and respond with greater sensitivity and compassion. It can strengthen our relationships, improve our communication, and foster a more connected and understanding world. Okay, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of how your body physically reacts to emotions. We've talked about the brain, the neurotransmitters, and all the behind-the-scenes activity. But what about the actual, tangible sensations you experience? That's where the autonomic nervous system comes in. This is the unsung hero, or maybe a hero of your emotional responses. Think of the autonomic nervous system as your body's autopilot. It's the system that regulates all those essential functions you don't have to consciously think about. Your heart rate, breathing, digestion, even your pupil dilation. And it plays a huge role in how your emotions manifest physically. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's the interplay between these two branches that dictates how your body responds to different emotional states. These two are like opposing sides on an equation. Let's start with the sympathetic nervous system. It's often referred to as the fight or flight response. This is your body's rapid response system to perceived danger or stress. Imagine you're walking down a dark alley and suddenly hear a strange noise. What happens? Your heart starts racing, your breathing quickens, your palms get sweaty. That's your sympathetic nervous system kicking into high gear. This system is designed to prepare you to either confront the threat, head-on fight, or escape as quickly as possible flight. To do this, it triggers a cascade of physiological changes. Your adrenal glands release adrenaline and noradrenaline. It's powerful hormones that amplify these effects. Your heart pumps faster to deliver more oxygen to your muscles. Your lungs work harder to increase oxygen intake. Blood flow is redirected away from non-essential functions, like digestion, and towards your muscles. Preparing them for action, your pupils dilate, allowing you to see more clearly. Your senses become heightened. You're basically a finely tuned, highly responsive machine, ready for anything. But here's the thing. The sympathetic nervous system doesn't differentiate between physical threats and emotional stressors. That argument you had with your boss? The anxiety you feel before a big presentation? The fear of public speaking? It all triggers the same fight or flight response. That's why you might experience the same physical sensations, whether you're facing a real danger or just feeling stressed out. And that's why chronic stress can be so detrimental to your health. Constantly activating the fight-or-flight response can lead to a host of problems, including high blood pressure, heart disease, digestive issues, and a weakened immune system. Your body is in constant alert mode. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the parasympathetic nervous system, often referred to as the rest and digest system. This is essentially the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. It's responsible for calming your body down, conserving energy, and promoting relaxation. Think of it as your body's natural brake pedal. After that stressful situation has passed, the parasympathetic nervous system steps in to restore balance. Your heart rate slows down, your breathing becomes deeper and more relaxed. Your muscles loosen, and your digestive system gets back to work. It's like your body saying, okay, crisis averted, time to chill out. The parasympathetic nervous system is primarily controlled by the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body. The vagus nerve acts like a communication highway between your brain and your major organs. It's influencing everything from your heart rate and digestion to your immune system and even your mood. When the vagus nerve is stimulated, it releases acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation and reduces stress. It essentially tells your body to slow down, conserve energy, focus on recovery. A strong and healthy parasympathetic nervous system is essential for overall well-being. It helps you manage stress, recover from illness, and maintain a healthy emotional balance. On the other hand, a weak or underactive parasympathetic nervous system can contribute to anxiety, depression, fatigue, and other health problems. So how do you strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system? There are several things you can do. Deep breathing exercises, like diaphragmatic breathing, are a simple and effective way to stimulate the vagus nerve. Mindfulness meditation and yoga can also help promote relaxation and reduce stress, thereby activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Spending time in nature, engaging in activities you enjoy, and cultivating positive social connections can also have a positive impact. Even things like massage and acupuncture can help stimulate the vagus nerve and promote relaxation. The key is to find practices that work for you and incorporate them into your daily routine. It's about consciously shifting your body out of that constant state of fight or flight and into a state of rest and digest. The interplay between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems is a delicate dance, constantly adjusting to the demands of your environment and your emotional state. When these two systems are in balance, you're able to respond effectively to stress and recover quickly afterwards. But when they're out of balance, it can lead to a whole host of physical and emotional problems. Understanding how your autonomic nervous system works is the first step towards taking control of your emotional responses. By consciously activating your parasympathetic nervous system, you can learn to manage stress, regulate your emotions, and improve your overall well-being. It's all about learning to listen to your body and respond to its needs in a healthy and balanced way. Remember, your body is constantly communicating with you, and the autonomic nervous system is a key part of that conversation. Learn to understand its language, and you'll be well on your way to mastering your emotions and living a healthier, happier life. Now, let's dive into the fascinating world of hormones and their profound influence on our emotional landscape. We often think of emotions as purely psychological experiences, but they're deeply intertwined with our physical biology, and hormones play a starring role in this intricate dance. Think of hormones as chemical messengers, released by glands throughout your body and traveling through your bloodstream to reach their target organs and tissues. These tiny molecules can have a dramatic impact on everything from our mood and energy levels to our appetite and sleep patterns. And, crucially, they exert a powerful influence on our emotional responses. Today, we're going to focus on two key players in the hormonal orchestra of emotions, cortisol and oxytocin. These two hormones represent opposite ends of the spectrum, with cortisol often associated with stress and anxiety, and oxytocin linked to love, bonding, and social connection. Understanding how these hormones work can shed light on why we feel the way we do in different situations and how we can potentially influence our emotional states. First up, let's talk about cortisol, often dubbed the stress hormone. Cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands, which sit atop our kidneys, and it's released in response to perceived threats or stressors. Now, when I say stressor, I don't just mean life-threatening situations. Stressors can be anything that your brain perceives as a challenge or a danger, from a looming deadline at work to a heated argument with a loved one. When your brain senses a stressor, it triggers a cascade of events that ultimately lead to the release of cortisol. This process begins in the hypothalamus, a region of the brain that acts as the command center for the stress response. The hypothalamus releases a hormone called corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH, which then stimulates the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticatric hormone, or ACT. A CTH then travels through the bloodstream to the adrenal glands, prompting them to produce and release cortisol. So what does cortisol do once it's released? Its primary function is to help your body cope with the stressor by mobilizing energy reserves and preparing you for fight or flight. Cortisol increases blood sugar levels, providing your muscles and brain with the fuel they need to respond to the perceived threat. It also suppresses the immune system. It redirects blood flow away from non-essential functions like digestion, sharpens your senses. In the short term, cortisol can be incredibly helpful. It allows you to react quickly and effectively in stressful situations, helping you escape danger or overcome challenges. But the problem arises when cortisol levels remain elevated for prolonged periods. Chronic stress and the resulting chronic cortisol elevation can have a number of negative consequences for your physical and mental health. For example, chronic cortisol exposure can impair cognitive function, making it difficult to concentrate, remember things, and make decisions. It can also disrupt sleep patterns, leading to insomnia and fatigue. Furthermore, chronic cortisol elevation can weaken the immune system, making you more susceptible to illness. It can also contribute to weight gain, particularly around the abdomen, and increase your risk of developing chronic diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. And, of course, chronic cortisol elevation can have a significant impact on your emotional well-being. It can contribute to feelings of anxiety, irritability, and depression. It can also make it more difficult to regulate your emotions, leading to increased reactivity and difficulty coping with stress. So, how can we manage cortisol levels and mitigate the negative effects of chronic stress? There are a number of strategies that can be helpful. Regular exercise is a great way to burn off excess energy and reduce cortisol levels. Mindfulness practices, such as meditation and deep breathing, can also help calm the nervous system and reduce stress. Spending time in nature has been shown to lower cortisol levels, as has engaging in activities you enjoy. Prioritizing sleep is also crucial, as sleep deprivation can significantly increase cortisol production. And of course, addressing the underlying stressors in your life is essential for long-term stress management. Now, Let's shift gears and talk about oxytocin, often referred to as the love hormone or the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is produced by the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland, and it plays a critical role in social bonding, attachment, and trust. Oxytocin is released in response to a variety of social and physical stimuli, such as hugging, cuddling, kissing, and even just making eye contact with someone you care about. It's also released during childbirth and breastfeeding. It's helping to strengthen the bond between mother and child. Oxytocin exerts its effects by binding to receptors in the brain and body, influencing a variety of physiological and psychological processes. In the brain, oxytocin promotes feelings of calm, relaxation, and well-being. It also reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, which helps to decrease anxiety and promote feelings of safety and security. Oxytocin also plays a key role in social cognition, helping us to understand and respond to the emotions of others. It increases empathy, trust, and cooperation, making us more likely to form strong social bonds. In fact, studies have shown that administering oxytocin can increase generosity and willingness to trust others in social situations, beyond its effects. On the brain, oxytocin also has a number of beneficial effects on the body. It can lower blood pressure, reduce heart rate, and promote relaxation. It can also boost the immune system and promote wound healing. Given its wide range of benefits, it's clear that oxytocin is a crucial hormone for our emotional and physical well-being. So, how can we boost oxytocin levels naturally? Well, the good news is that there are many simple things we can do. Spending time with loved ones, engaging in physical touch, practicing acts of kindness, and even just thinking positive thoughts about others can all stimulate oxytocin release. Activities like yoga and massage can also promote oxytocin production, as can spending time with animals. And of course, engaging in activities that promote social connection, such as volunteering or joining a club, can also be very beneficial. In conclusion, cortisol and oxytocin are just two examples of the many hormones that influence our emotional landscape. Understanding how these hormones work can provide valuable insights into why we feel the way we do and how we can potentially influence our emotional states. By managing stress, promoting social connection, and engaging in activities that boost our well-being, we can help to create a more balanced and harmonious hormonal environment, leading to greater emotional resilience and overall happiness. It's a complex system, but one that, with a little knowledge, we can begin to navigate with greater awareness and intention. Have you ever stopped to consider why you feel what you feel? Not in a philosophical, what is the meaning of life kind of way, but from a purely biological standpoint. Why do we experience joy, sadness, anger, fear? Are these emotions just random byproducts of our complex brains, or do they serve a more fundamental purpose? Well, let's delve into the evolutionary perspective and explore the adaptive functions of emotions. Think back, way back to our earliest ancestors. Picture them navigating a world filled with dangers, predators, starvation, disease, survival. It wasn't a guarantee. It was a daily struggle. Now imagine those early humans without emotions. How would they react to a saber-toothed tiger lurking in the shadows? Would they calmly analyze the situation, weigh the pros and cons of confronting the beast, and then rationally decide on a course of action? Probably not. By the time they finished their risk assessment, they'd be lunch. That's where emotions come in. Fear in this scenario isn't just a feeling, it's a survival mechanism. It triggers a cascade of physiological responses increased heart rate, rapid breathing, heightened senses preparing the body for immediate action, either fight or flight. That split-second advantage, that instinctual urge to run or defend oneself, could mean the difference between life and death. Emotions, from this perspective, are rapid, automatic responses to situations that have significant consequences for our survival and reproduction. They're like pre-programmed instructions, honed over millions of years of evolution, designed to guide our behavior in ways that maximize our chances of survival and passing on our genes. Consider the emotion of disgust. Might seem unpleasant, but disgust serves a vital function, protecting us from disease. When we encounter something that smells rotten or looks contaminated, disgust kicks in, prompting us to avoid it. This aversion helps us steer clear of potentially harmful pathogens and toxins, reducing our risk of illness. It's not a conscious decision-making process. It's an automatic gut-level reaction designed to keep us safe. Or take the example of joy. What good is happiness in the grand scheme of survival? Well, joy reinforces behaviors that are beneficial to us. When we achieve a goal, experience a positive social interaction, or discover a new food source, we feel joy. This positive emotion encourages us to repeat those behaviors, increasing our chances of future success and well-being. It's nature's way of saying, "Good job, keep doing that." Even seemingly negative emotions like sadness and anger play important roles. Sadness, triggered by loss or disappointment, can motivate us to seek comfort and support from others. It signals to our social group that we need help strengthening social bonds and increasing our chances of survival in a group setting. Think about a child crying when separated from their parents. That cry is a signal designed to elicit caregiving and protection. Anger, on the other hand, arises when we perceive a threat or injustice. It motivates us to defend ourselves, assert our rights, and correct perceived wrongs. Environment anger can be a powerful force, driving us to fight for resources and status. Imagine a primate challenging a rival for dominance within the group. That display of aggression, fueled by anger, can establish a social hierarchy that ensures access to resources and mates. Now, it's important to note that emotions aren't always perfectly aligned with our modern needs. Our brains evolved in a very different environment than the one we inhabit today. In the ancestral environment, threats were often immediate and physical predators, starvation, rival tribes. In our modern world, threats are often more abstract and social, financial stress, workplace conflicts, social media pressures. This mismatch between our evolved emotional responses and our current environment can lead to problems. For example, the fear response designed to protect us from physical danger can be triggered by social anxieties or performance pressures, leading to chronic stress and anxiety disorders. Our brains haven't quite caught up with the rapid changes in our society. Furthermore, the social context drastically impacts our emotional landscape. Our ancestors likely lived in small, tightly knit communities where cooperation and social harmony were essential for survival. Therefore, emotions evolved to promote prosocial behavior. Think about empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Empathy allows us to cooperate effectively, build strong relationships, and avoid conflicts. It is the basis for the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Guilt and shame, on the other hand, arise when we violate social norms or harm others. These emotions motivate us to repair relationships, make amends for our mistakes, and avoid repeating harmful behaviors. They are essential for maintaining social cohesion and preventing social chaos. It is the reason we have the justice system today. So the next time you experience a strong emotion, take a moment to consider its potential evolutionary origins. Ask yourself, what purpose might this emotion have served for my ancestors? Understanding the adaptive functions of emotions can provide valuable insights into our behavior, our relationships, and our place in the natural world. Emotions aren't just random feelings. They're powerful tools shaped by evolution to help us survive, thrive, and connect with one another. They are a deep part of our story as humans. Emotions, those vibrant and sometimes overwhelming experiences, aren't just internal fireworks. They're the invisible glue that binds us together, the language of connection, the foundation upon which we build our societies and relationships. Think about it. How often do you rely on emotions, yours and others, to navigate the social landscape? We often focus on the personal aspect of emotions, how we feel, what we experience. But that's only half the story. Emotions are inherently social. They're designed, in part, to communicate our internal states to others, to signal our needs, intentions, and desires even before we consciously articulate them. Imagine a baby crying. That cry, a raw expression of distress, immediately elicits a caring response from a parent. That's emotion at its most primal, its most effective. The baby isn't using words, but the emotion conveyed, need, discomfort, fear, is crystal clear. As we grow, our emotional communication becomes more nuanced, but the underlying principle remains the same. A smile signals friendliness and openness, inviting connection. A furrowed brow suggests concern or disagreement. A blush reveals embarrassment or attraction. These are all emotional cues, constantly broadcasted and interpreted, shaping our interactions and influencing our relationships. Consider the power of empathy. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, is a cornerstone of social bonding. It allows us to step into someone else's shoes, to see the world from their perspective, and to respond with compassion and understanding. And what fuels empathy? Emotions. We recognize the emotional signals of others, their sadness, their joy, their anger, and that recognition triggers a corresponding emotional response within ourselves. This shared emotional experience creates a sense of connection, feeling of wins that strengthens social bonds. Think about the role of emotions in cooperation. Cooperation is essential for human survival and progress. Emotions like trust, gratitude, and guilt play a crucial role in fostering cooperation. We're more likely to cooperate with someone we trust, someone who has shown us kindness or reliability. Gratitude reinforces cooperative behavior, making us more likely to reciprocate acts of generosity. Guilt prevents us from exploiting others, ensuring fairness and maintaining social harmony. Even seemingly negative emotions like anger can serve a social function. Anger, when expressed appropriately, can signal that a boundary has been crossed, that an injustice has been committed, or that a need is not being met. It can motivate us to stand up for ourselves and others, to challenge unfair systems, and to fight for what we believe is right. Of course, anger can also be destructive, but its underlying purpose is often to protect ourselves and our social group. Now, let's consider the impact of emotions on group dynamics. Emotions can spread like wildfire through a group, creating a phenomenon known as emotional contagion. Someone in a group is feeling anxious or stressed. That anxiety can quickly spread to others, creating a sense of unease and tension. Conversely, if someone is feeling optimistic and enthusiastic, that positivity can uplift the entire group, fostering a sense of camaraderie and motivation. This emotional contagion can have a profound impact on group decision-making and overall cohesion. Leaders who are able to manage their own emotions and inspire positive emotions in others are more likely to create successful and thriving teams. Furthermore, emotions play a vital role in maintaining social hierarchies. Displays of dominance like assertive body language and a confident tone of voice can help individuals climb the social ladder. Conversely, displays of submission, like lowered gaze and a hesitant demeanor, can signal deference and respect too. Those in positions of power, these emotional signals, often subtle and unconscious, help to establish and maintain social order within groups. The expression of emotions also strengthens our relationships. Sharing our vulnerabilities, our fears, and our joys with others creates a sense of intimacy and trust. When we allow ourselves to be seen, truly seen by others, we foster deeper and more meaningful connections. Think about the power of a heartfelt apology. An apology delivered with sincerity and remorse can heal a broken relationship, build trust, and restore social harmony. It requires vulnerability, a willingness to acknowledge our mistakes, and to express empathy for the person we have wronged. So emotions aren't just personal experiences. They're the language of connection, the fuel of cooperation, and the foundation of our social bonds. By understanding the social functions of emotions, we can become more effective communicators, more empathetic listeners, and more skilled navigators of the complex social world. It's about recognizing that our feelings are not just internal noise, but valuable signals that connect us to each other, weaving the intricate tapestry of human relationships. In essence, we're wired to connect, and emotions are the wires have. You ever noticed how differently people express their emotions in different parts of the world? Or even within different communities right here at home? It's not just about language barriers. It's a deeper phenomenon known as cultural influence on emotions. It's about how the very cultures we inhabit shape not only how we express what we feel, but sometimes even what we feel. Think about it. What might be considered a perfectly acceptable display of grief in one country? Say, wailing openly at a funeral might be seen as overly dramatic or even inappropriate in another, where stoicism and quiet reflection are favored. Similarly, displays of anger, joy, or even affection can vary widely. These aren't just surface-level differences. They reflect fundamental values and beliefs embedded within each culture. So how does this happen? How does culture, this invisible, yet powerful force, mold our emotional landscape? Well, it starts early. From the moment we're born, we're immersed in a sea of cultural cues. Our families, our communities, and the media all communicate subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, messages about which emotions are valued, which are discouraged, and how they should be expressed. These messages are often conveyed through what are called display rules. Display rules are unwritten social norms that dictate how we're supposed to manage and modify our emotional expressions depending on the social context. They're like scripts for our emotions, telling us when to amplify, minimize, or even completely suppress what we're feeling. For example, in some East Asian cultures, maintaining harmony and avoiding conflict are highly valued. As a result, individuals may be encouraged to suppress negative emotions like anger or sadness in public, prioritizing the group's well-being over individual expression. In contrast, some Western cultures may place a greater emphasis on individual expression and authenticity, leading to more open displays of emotion. But cultural influence goes even deeper than just display rules. It can also affect the experience of emotions themselves. This idea is closely tied to the concept of emotional constructionism. It suggests that emotions aren't simply innate, hardwired responses, but are rather constructed through a combination of physiological sensations, cognitive appraisals, and cultural concepts. In other words, our brains use cultural knowledge and past experiences to interpret raw sensory input and create our emotional experiences. So, the way we categorize and understand emotions can be profoundly influenced by our cultural background. Think about a concept like ame in Japanese culture. It loosely translates to a feeling of dependence and indulgence, often experienced in close relationships. There isn't a perfect equivalent in many Western languages, highlighting how certain emotional experiences are culturally specific. Another fascinating aspect of cultural influence is the role of language. The words we use to describe emotions can shape how we perceive and experience them. Some languages have a rich vocabulary for certain emotions that are less differentiated. In other languages, this suggests that cultures may pay more attention to and elaborate on certain emotional states, leading to a more nuanced understanding of them. For instance, consider the German word Schadenfreude, which describes the feeling of pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. While we might experience something similar, the existence of a specific word for it in German suggests a cultural recognition and perhaps even a subtle acceptance of this emotion that might be less prevalent elsewhere. Furthermore, cultural narratives and stories play a crucial role in shaping our emotional understanding. Myths, legends, and folklore often serve as vehicles for transmitting cultural values and beliefs about emotions. These stories can provide models for how to respond to different emotional situations and reinforce culturally appropriate emotionally expressions. For instance, think about the role of Romeo and Juliet in Western culture. The tragic tale of forbidden love has shaped our understanding of romantic relationships and the power of emotions like passion and devotion. Similarly, stories about stoic heroes who suppress their emotions in the face of adversity can reinforce cultural ideals about emotional control. However, it's crucial to avoid overgeneralizations when discussing cultural influences on emotions. Within any culture, there's a great deal of individual variation. Factors like personality, gender, social class, And personal experiences can all interact with cultural norms to shape an individual's emotional expression and experience. Furthermore, cultures are constantly evolving, and globalization is leading to increased interaction and exchange between different cultures. This can result in the blending of emotional norms and the emergence of new cultural expressions. For example, the rise of social media has created new platforms for emotional expression and communication, allowing individuals to connect with people from diverse cultural backgrounds and share their emotional experiences in ways that were never before possible. Understanding cultural influences on emotions is not just an academic exercise. It has important implications for our daily lives. It can help us to become more aware of our own emotional biases and assumptions, and to appreciate the diversity of emotional experiences across different cultures. It can also improve our communication skills and our ability to build meaningful relationships with people from different backgrounds. In a world that is becoming increasingly interconnected, understanding cultural nuances is more important than ever. By recognizing the ways in which culture shapes our emotions, we can foster greater empathy, understanding, and respect for one another. So next time you're interacting with someone from a different cultural background, take a moment to consider how their emotional expressions might be influenced by their cultural upbringing. You might be surprised by what you discover. All right, let's talk about something crucial: how we actually deal with the tidal waves of emotion that wash over us. This is where emotional regulation comes in. Think of it as your internal control panel, allowing you to manage and modulate your emotional experience in healthy and adaptive ways. It's not about suppressing or denying your feelings. It's not about becoming some emotionless robot. Instead, it's about understanding your emotions, accepting them, and choosing how you respond to them. Why is this so important? Well, unregulated emotions can wreak havoc on our lives. It can lead to impulsive decisions, strained relationships, increased stress, and even mental health issues. On the other hand, effective emotional regulation can improve our relationships, enhance our performance, boost our resilience, and contribute to our overall well-being. So what are some strategies we can use to navigate our emotional landscape? There's no one-size-fits-all answer, and what works for one person might not work for another. It's about finding the techniques that resonate with you and practicing them regularly. First up, let's talk about situation selection. This is all about proactively choosing situations that are likely to evoke the emotions you want to experience and avoiding situations that you know will trigger negative emotions. For example, if you know that spending time with a certain relative always leaves you feeling stressed and anxious, you might choose to limit your interactions with that person or find ways to make those interactions less triggering. Similarly, if you find that listening to upbeat music always puts you in a good mood, you might make a conscious effort to incorporate more of that music into your day. This isn't about living in a bubble or avoiding all challenges. It's about being mindful of your emotional triggers and making informed choices about the environments you expose yourself to. Next, we have situation modification. This involves actively changing a situation to alter its emotional impact. Let's say you're dreading a presentation at work. Instead of just passively accepting your anxiety, you could take steps to modify the situation. You could practice your presentation beforehand, visualize yourself succeeding, or even ask a friend or colleague for feedback. By actively shaping the situation, you can reduce its potential to trigger negative emotions. Another powerful strategy is attentional deployment. This refers to directing your attention away from emotionally upsetting stimuli. Think of it as an emotional distraction technique. For example, if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming exam, you might choose to focus on a hobby you enjoy, spend time with loved ones, or engage in a relaxing activity like reading a book or taking a walk in nature. It's important to note that attentional deployment isn't about ignoring your problems. It's about temporarily shifting your focus to something more positive to regulate your emotions and prevent yourself from getting overwhelmed. Once you've calmed down, you can then return to the problem with a clearer and more rational perspective, and that leads us to cognitive change. This is where we actively try to change the way we think about a situation to alter its emotional impact. This often involves challenging negative or unhelpful thought patterns and replacing them with more balanced and realistic ones. For example, if you make a mistake at work and find yourself thinking, "I'm such a failure," you could challenge that thought by asking yourself, "Is that really true? Have I never succeeded at anything? Or is it more likely that I'm just human and everyone makes mistakes sometimes?" Cognitive change requires a bit of self-reflection and a willingness to question your own assumptions. It's about reframing your perspective to see things in a more positive and constructive light. This can be done through various techniques, like cognitive restructuring, positive self-talk, or even mindfulness practices. Finally, we have response modulation. This involves directly influencing your emotional responses after they've already been triggered. This might involve techniques like deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, or even physical exercise. These techniques can help to calm your nervous system, reduce feelings of anxiety or anger, and restore a sense of balance. Another important aspect of response modulation is learning to tolerate uncomfortable emotions. We often try to avoid or suppress negative emotions, but this can actually make them stronger in the long run. Instead, try to accept your emotions without judgment, allowing yourself to feel them without getting carried away by them. Remind yourself that emotions are temporary and that they will eventually pass. It's also important to develop healthy coping mechanisms for dealing with difficult emotions. This might involve talking to a trusted friend or therapist, journaling, or engaging in creative activities. The key is to find strategies that help you process your emotions in a constructive way, rather than resorting to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse or self-harm. Emotional regulation is a skill that takes time and practice to develop. It's not about achieving some perfect state of emotional control, but rather about learning to navigate your emotional experiences with greater awareness, flexibility, and resilience. Be patient with yourself, experiment with different strategies. Remember that setbacks are a normal part of the process. By developing your emotional regulation skills, you can empower yourself to live a more fulfilling and meaningful life, build stronger relationships, and navigate the challenges of life with greater grace and ease. It's a journey worth undertaking, and the rewards are immeasurable now. Let's talk about something called emotional intelligence. You've probably heard the term thrown around, maybe in a business context or a self-help book. But what does it really mean? And more importantly, how can understanding and utilizing our emotions lead to both personal and social success? Emotional intelligence, or EI, boils down to this. It's the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and utilize your own emotions, and to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. It's not about being overly sensitive or touchy-feely. It's about being aware and skillful in navigating the complex world of human emotions. Think of it as a superpower for social interaction, key to unlocking deeper relationships, and a powerful tool for achieving your goals. EI is often broken down into 5 core components. Let's walk through each one. First, there's self-awareness. This is the foundation upon which all other aspects of EI are built. It's the ability to recognize your own emotions as they happen, to understand what triggers them, and to be aware of their impact on your thoughts and behaviors. It's about knowing your strengths and weaknesses, your values and your motivations. Are you quick to anger? Do you tend to withdraw when you feel overwhelmed? Are you naturally optimistic or more prone to negativity? Self-awareness isn't a judgment, it's simply a recognition. It's like having an internal radar that constantly scans your emotional landscape. For example, maybe you notice that you always feel stressed before giving a presentation. That's self-awareness in action. Secondly, we have self-regulation. This is the ability to manage your emotions, to control impulsive feelings and behaviors, and to adapt to changing circumstances. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about finding healthy ways to express them and to channel them in productive ways. Imagine you're in a frustrating meeting. Self-regulation allows you to take a deep breath, remain calm, and express your concerns constructively. Rather than lashing out in anger, it's about being in control of your emotional reactions rather than being controlled by them. The third key component is motivation. Emotionally intelligent people are driven by more than just external rewards like money or status. They're intrinsically motivated meaning they're passionate about what they do, and they're driven by a deep sense of purpose. They're optimistic, resilient, and able to bounce back from setbacks. Think about an entrepreneur who faces numerous rejections, but continues to persevere because they believe in their vision.
Ow.
That's intrinsic motivation fueled by emotional intelligence. They use their emotions to drive them forward, turning challenges into opportunities. Now we move into the interpersonal aspects of EI, starting with empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, seeing the world from their perspective, and recognizing their emotions. It's not about agreeing with them or condoning their behavior, simply about understanding what they're going through. Imagine a friend who is going through a difficult time. Empathy allows you to listen without judgment, offer support, and provide comfort. It's about connecting with others on an emotional level, building trust, and fostering deeper relationships. Finally, we have social skills. This is the ability to manage relationships effectively, to communicate clearly, to resolve conflicts constructively, and to build strong bonds with others. It's about being a good listener, a team player, and a persuasive communicator. Imagine leading a team through a challenging project. Strong social skills allow you to motivate your team members, delegate effectively, and resolve conflicts fairly. It's about creating a positive and productive environment where everyone feels valued and respected. So, why is emotional intelligence so important? Well, the benefits are far-reaching. Studies have shown that people with high EI tend to be more successful in their careers, have stronger relationships, are more resilient in the face of stress, and are generally happier and more fulfilled. In the workplace, EI can lead to better leadership, improved teamwork, and increased productivity. Emotionally intelligent leaders are able to inspire and motivate their teams, build trust, and create a positive work environment. They're also better at handling conflict, making difficult decisions, and adapting to change in personal relationships. EI can lead to deeper connections, improved communication, and greater intimacy. Emotionally intelligent partners are able to understand each other's needs, resolve conflicts constructively, and provide emotional support. They're also better at building trust, fostering empathy, and creating a strong sense of connection. But perhaps the most significant benefit of EI is its impact on our overall well-being. By understanding and managing our emotions, we can reduce stress, improve our mood, and increase our resilience. We can also build stronger self-esteem, develop a greater sense of purpose, and live more authentically. The good news is that emotional intelligence is not a fixed trait. It's a skill that can be developed and improved over time. It requires self-awareness, practice, and a willingness to learn. So how can you boost your own emotional intelligence? Here are a few practical tips. Asterisk. Practice mindfulness. Take time each day to focus on your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Pay attention to your physical sensations, your emotions, and your thoughts as they arise. This can help you become more aware of your emotional patterns and triggers. Asterisk. Seek feedback. Ask trusted friends, family members, or colleagues for honest feedback about your emotional strengths and weaknesses. Be open to criticism and use it as an opportunity to grow. Asterisk. Practice empathy. Make a conscious effort to understand the perspectives of others. Listen actively, ask questions, and try to see the world from their point of view. Asterisk. Learn to manage stress. Develop healthy coping mechanisms for dealing with stress. This might include exercise, meditation, spending time in nature, or pursuing hobbies. Asterisk. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself when you make mistakes. Recognize that everyone struggles with their emotions from time to time. Developing emotional intelligence is a lifelong journey. It requires commitment, effort, and a willingness to embrace your emotions. But the rewards are well worth the effort. By understanding and utilizing your emotions, you can unlock your full potential, build stronger relationships, and live a more fulfilling life. It's about learning to navigate the inner landscape of feelings with skill and grace, and using that knowledge to create a more positive and connected world around you. So, what does the future hold for the science of emotions? What new tools and technologies are on the horizon? And what groundbreaking research directions are being explored? The field is evolving at an incredible pace, fueled by advances in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and even virtual reality. Let's take a peek into what might be coming. One of the most exciting areas is the continued refinement of neuroimaging techniques. We've already talked about fMRI and EEG, but these are just the starting points. Think about it. fMRI is powerful. As it is, it still only gives us a relatively coarse-grained view of brain activity. It's like looking at a city from space. You can see the major highways and landmarks, but you miss all the intricate details of what's happening on the ground. Newer techniques, like high-density, EEG, and magnetoencephalography, or MEG, are offering much higher temporal resolution, allowing us to track the rapidly changing dynamics of emotional processing in real time. Imagine being able to see the exact sequence of neural events that unfold as someone experiences fear or joy, millisecond by millisecond. It's like having a super-fast camera that can capture the fleeting moments of emotional experience, and it doesn't stop there. Researchers are also exploring the use of more advanced imaging modalities, such as two-photon microscopy, which allows for incredibly detailed imaging of neuronal activity at the cellular level. While these techniques are mostly used in animal studies at the moment, they offer the potential to unlock even deeper secrets about the neural circuits that underlie our emotions. Beyond simply mapping brain activity, the future of emotion science also involves manipulating it. Techniques like transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCs, are allowing scientists to non-invasively stimulate or inhibit specific brain regions. Emotional processing and behavior. It's like having a remote control for the brain, allowing us to tweak the dials of emotion and see what happens. This has huge implications for treating mental health disorders. For example, TMS is already being used to treat depression by stimulating the prefrontal cortex, the brain region involved in emotional regulation. In the future, we might see even more targeted and personalized approaches to neuromodulation. Using these techniques to fine-tune brain activity and alleviate emotional suffering, of course. The ethical considerations of manipulating the brain are significant. We need to be very careful about how we use these technologies and ensure that they are used responsibly and ethically. But the potential benefits for treating mental illness are enormous. Another exciting area is the intersection of emotion, science, and artificial intelligence. AI is rapidly advancing, and researchers are developing algorithms that can recognize and even respond to human emotions. Think about it. Your smartphone can already detect your facial expressions and adjust its settings accordingly. In the future, we might see AI systems that can truly understand our emotional states and provide personalized support and assistance. Imagine a virtual therapist that can analyze your speech patterns, facial expressions, and body language to detect signs of distress, and then offer tailored advice and guidance, or a customer service agent that can detect when you're feeling frustrated and adjust its approach to de-escalate the situation. The possibilities are endless. But AI is not just a tool for understanding and responding to emotions. It's also a tool for studying them. Researchers are using AI to create sophisticated models of emotional processing, simulating how emotions arise, interact, and influence behavior. These models can help us to test theories about emotion and to identify new targets for intervention. Particularly fascinating area is the development of AI systems that can experience emotions themselves. This is still in its early stages, but researchers are starting to create AI agents that can learn to associate certain events with positive or negative outcomes, and then adjust their behavior accordingly. While these AI emotions are, obviously, very different from human emotions, they provide a valuable platform for exploring the fundamental principles of emotional processing. Virtual reality is also playing an increasingly important role in emotion science. VR allows us to create highly realistic and immersive environments that can evoke strong emotional responses. We can use VR to simulate stressful situations, such as public speaking or social interactions, and then study how people respond emotionally and behaviorally. This has huge implications for treating anxiety disorders and phobias. For example, VR exposure therapy is already being used to help people overcome their fear of heights or their fear of spiders. By gradually exposing people to these feared stimuli in a safe and controlled environment, we can help them to learn to regulate their emotional responses and to reduce their anxiety. VR is also being used to study the social aspects of emotion. Researchers are creating virtual environments where people can interact with avatars that express different emotions. This allows us to study how emotions are communicated and interpreted in social situations and how emotions influence our social behavior. Another key area for future research is the study of individual differences in emotional processing. We know that people vary widely in their emotional reactivity, their ability to regulate their emotions, and their susceptibility to mental health disorders. Understanding the biological and environmental factors that contribute to these individual differences is crucial for developing personalized interventions. For example, researchers are studying the role of genetics in emotional processing, identifying genes that are associated with increased risk for anxiety or depression. They are also studying the role of early life experiences, such as childhood trauma, in shaping emotional development. By combining these different lines of research, we can gain a more complete understanding of the complex interplay of factors that contribute to our emotional lives, and this, in turn, will allow us to develop more effective strategies for promoting emotional well-being and treating mental illness. Finally, the future of emotion science will also involve a greater emphasis on interdisciplinary collaboration. Emotions are complex phenomena that are influenced by a wide range of factors, from genetics and neuroscience to culture and society. To truly understand emotions, we need to bring together experts from different fields, including psychologists, neuroscientists, computer scientists, sociologists, and anthropologists. By working together, we can develop more comprehensive and integrated models of emotional processing. We can translate these models into practical interventions that benefit society. The journey to understanding the science of emotions is far from over. It's just getting started. As technology advances and research deepens, we can look forward to a future where we know more about our feelings and can learn to navigate out our emotional landscape more effectively than ever before. Growth, understanding, and improved mental well-being for all.